Leonard Lenny Walker adjusted the rearview mirror of the old yellow school bus with a practiced flick. The familiar creak of the steering wheel beneath his cowarden and hand been in his house only routine. The roads of Brookvale, Indiana stretched ahead, lined with early autumn trees just beginning to blush with orange. At 63, Lenny had long retired from his former career as an auto technician. Driving the school bus had given his life a new rhythm, a simple kind of purpose. Every afternoon, he drove the same route from Brookvale Intermediate School, dropping off laughing, chattering kids in their neat suburban neighborhoods. The afternoon sun angled through the side windows of the bus, streaking the blue-gray vinyl seats with stripes of gold and shadow. It was 3:46 p.m. on schedule. Lenny glanced into the oversized rectangular mirror fixed just above the windshield. Most of the kids were their usual loud selves, talking over each other about TikTok drama, pop quizzes, and weekend soccer practice. But his eyes instinctively flicked toward seat 4B, third row behind the driver's seat, directly above the air vent. That seat hadn't been of interest to him until the past few days. Sitting there, shoulders slouched and face partially hidden beneath wisps of chestnut hair, was a girl named Clara Jensen. According to the roster clipped to the clipboard near his seat, she was in Class 10A and had only joined Brookvale Intermediate School a little over 2 weeks ago. Clara wasn't like the other students. She didn't giggle. She didn't joke or jostle backpacks. She didn't even pull out a phone to scroll through social media like the others. Instead, her movements were small, almost invisible. Her hands stayed tucked inside the sleeves of her navy hoodie, and her eyes were usually downcast, fixed on her shoes or the cracks in the vinyl seat back ahead of her. And lately, especially over the past 3 afternoons, Lenny had noticed something deeply unsettling. Clara had been crying, not the kind of open sobbing that would draw attention. No, it was quiet, subtle. Her shoulders would quake slightly, and every so often, she'd lift a sleeve to discreetly wipe her cheeks. Lenny had seen it all before. 40 years working with people taught him how to recognize silent pain when it tried to hide in plain sight. But today, something about Clara's demeanor pulled at him harder than usual. It was in her posture, that outfield's existence. At the Fifth Avenue stop, 2 boys disembarked with their usual, tearful, "Thanks, Mr. Walker," while Lenny forced a smile. "Take care, boys." He watched them walk to their respective driveways before closing the door and continuing the route. With each stop, the bus became quieter as kids exited, and Clara's sniffles became more audible. Then, at one point, something strange happened. Lenny was making a left turn at Bellflower Street when he caught a flicker of motion from Clara. She had hunched even lower, her hand reaching beneath the seat, seemingly fiddling with the air vent. A metallic clank echoed in the near-empty bus. A sound Lenny hadn't heard before, sharp and oddly hollow. "Everything okay back there?" he asked, trying to sound casual but alert. Clara jerked upright as if shocked by an electric jolt. Her eyes were wide, lips parted. "Yes," she replied quickly, her voice little more than a breath. "Sorry, I dropped my tissue," Lenny nodded, keeping his eyes on the road, but his gut stirred uneasily. He thought back to yesterday, when he'd tried to ask Clara how she was adjusting to school. Her answers had been monosyllabic at best. Yeah. That kind of wall was common in kids going through difficult transitions. But now Lenny wasn't sure this was just a shy teen having a rough week. Something deeper was wrong, something more dangerous, and he was the only adult witnessing it day after day. As the bus rolled on toward Clara's stop, he knew he couldn't just drop her off and move on with his day. Not this time. Clara's stop was the last one on Lenny's route, a modest split-level house with flaking yellow paint at the end of Myrtle Creek Lane. As he pulled the bus to a smooth stop in front of the driveway, the late afternoon sun dipped just behind the tree line, casting a dim golden hue across the lawn. He reached for the lever and swung open the bus door with a mechanical hiss. "Let him shift." Clara slowly stood, her pink canvas backpack sagging from one shoulder. As she passed by him, Lenny noticed the dark crescents under her eyes, the way she avoided looking at him directly, and the redness around her nose. "Have a good evening, Clara," he offered with a smile, practiced smile. "You too," she murmured, without meeting his gaze, stepping down the metal stairs of the bus. But Lenny didn't close the door right away. He didn't shift into gear. Instead, he stood up from the driver's seat and followed her down onto the sidewalk. His work boots hit the concrete with a solid thud. Clara turned, startled. "Why are you following me?" she asked, her voice cracking slightly. "I'm not trying to scare you, kid," he said softly. "I've just noticed you've seemed upset lately. I was thinking maybe I should check in with your folks, make sure everything's okay at home." The change in Clara's expression was immediate. The neutral, guarded look gave way to panic. She shook her head quickly, voice rising in pitch. "No, you don't have to do that. It's nothing really. School's just been hard and I miss my old friends, that's all." Lenny hesitated, unsure how far to push. Years on the job had taught him to tread carefully. Some kids would open up if you gave them space, others needed firm intervention. He was trying to figure out which kind Clara was. But before he could say more, the front door of the house flung open. A tall man in his mid-40s stepped onto the porch, his build broad, posture stiff. He wore a black polo shirt tucked into faded jeans, and his eyes were hidden behind reflective sunglasses even in the dimming light. "Clara," the man barked, "inside." "Now." She froze, then quickly scurried toward the house. Just before disappearing through the door, she turned her head slightly, just enough for Lenny to catch a fleeting glance. Her eyes, wide and wet, held something wordless. A silent plea. Then the door clicked shut behind her. The man remained on the porch, staring down at Lenny. "Can I help you with something?" His tone was clipped. Lenny walked a few paces up the path, keeping a polite distance. "Sir, I'm Leonard Walker. I drive Clara's school bus. I've been noticing that she seems a bit upset lately, crying after school, acting withdrawn. It's wanted to check if everything at home's okay." The man adjusted his sunglasses, revealing a momentary flicker of something. Irritation? Calculation? It passed too fast to be sure. "I'm Russell Grant," he said. "Clara's stepfather. Her mom's not home right now." Lenny nodded. "I understand. I just thought someone should be aware of what I've seen. Kids sometimes bottle things up, and I'd hate for anything serious to go unnoticed." "Her grandmother passed recently," he said. "They were close. It's hit her hard." The explanation made sense, and yet Lenny couldn't shake the hollowness in the man's tone. There was no grief there, no emotion really, just words, polished and rehearsed. "I'm sorry for your loss," Lenny replied. "Please pass along my condolences to Clara's mother." Russell gave a non-committal nod, then turned and disappeared into the house, some soul banging shut behind him. Lenny stood for a moment on the sidewalk, staring at the closed door. Something about the whole exchange gnawed at him. Maybe it was the way Russell hadn't even asked why a stranger was concerned enough to follow his stepdaughter home. Or maybe it was the way Clara's eyes had widened when he mentioned her parents. That look. Like someone calling for help without making a sound. Back on the bus, Lenny sat for a long moment before starting the engine. The seats behind him were empty, the sun now a faint orange smear along the horizon. He drove back toward the depot on autopilot, his mind spinning. The unease hadn't gone away, it had rooted itself deeper. As he parked the bus in its designated slot and shut off the ignition, he decided to do a walkthrough, collecting trash, forgotten lunchboxes, wadded-up worksheets. But this time, when he reached Clara's seat, he crouched down low. He remembered that metallic clank from earlier. The air vent beneath her seat caught his eye. At first glance it looked fine, but on closer inspection he saw a faint gap near the edge, where the metal plate didn't quite sit flush against the floor. He reached down with a grunt, easing his fingers into the narrow slit, and then he felt it. Something small, smooth, and distinctly not part of the bus. He fished it out. A plastic blister pack, half full, pink pills. Lenny stared at it for a second, uncomprehending, until he turned it over and read the name, birth control. For a moment, the world narrowed to a tunnel. Birth control pills, hidden under the seat of a 15-year-old girl. His stomach turned. His mind raced back to her crying, her flinching posture, the way she recoiled when he said he'd talked to her parents. Lenny took a photo of the blister pack with his phone, capturing it against the backdrop of the bus seat for context. Then he slipped it into a plastic sandwich bag he kept in his glove compartment. As he walked back toward the depot office to return his keys, the knot in his chest twisted tighter. There was something terribly wrong in that house on Myrtle Creek Lane, and he was now the only adult who knew.
After leaving the bus depot, Lenny walked slowly to his aging Chevy sedan, the soft rattling of the keys in his hand the only sound accompanying him in the empty lot. The car's once proud emerald green paint had dulled to a mossy hue, flecked with rust. As he settled into the driver's seat and turned the ignition, the engine gave a familiar cough before sputtering to life. The ride home was quiet, but Lenny's mind was a storm. The birth control pills now sat in a plastic sandwich bag on the passenger seat, faintly rattling with every bump in the road. He'd taken multiple pictures of the pack, front and back. The name of the medication, the partial dosage used, the manufacturer. It was all there, staring up at him like evidence from a crime scene. The route back to his modest one-story home took him down Meadow Hill Boulevard, which, as chance would have it, passed directly by Myrtle Creek Lane, Clara's street. His hands tightened slightly on the wheel as he neared the turn. He didn't mean to slow down, not at first. It was instinct, curiosity wrapped in concern, laced with a deep unease that wouldn't let him go. His signal clicked on. He turned down the lane and coasted toward the yellow house with peeling trim, the same one where he had dropped Clara off less than an hour earlier. The curtains in the living room were drawn, lights inside dim. No movement. Lenny hesitated at the curb, engine idling. He considered walking up to the door again, confronting Russell Grant with what he'd found. Maybe the man didn't know. Maybe Clara was taking the pills in secret, scared to tell anyone. But Lenny remembered how Russell had spoken to Clara, sharp and commanding, and how she had looked back at him with those wide, terrified eyes. No, that wasn't a man likely to be in the dark. Still, uncertainty gnawed at Lenny. What if he was wrong? What if there was an innocent explanation? A misunderstanding? He shifted the car into drive, slowly moving past the house. But something inside pulled at him, a gut feeling honed over 6 decades of life. He reached the end of the block, made a U-turn, and parked discreetly on the opposite side of the street, just far enough away to avoid being noticed. He cut the engine. He sat there watching. Nothing moved. No lights flickered on. No silhouettes appeared behind the blinds. Lenny waited another 5 minutes, then reached for his phone. Still no response from Principal Banner, whom he had texted nearly an hour ago with the photos. He scrolled through his contacts again, eyes scanning for someone else, anyone who might care enough to listen. That's when he saw her name, Margaret Brenner, Clara's homeroom teacher. They'd met briefly during orientation at the start of the school year. She was young, maybe early 30s, energetic, and clearly cared deeply for her students. Without thinking further, Lenny hit the call button and put the phone on speaker as it rang from the center console. After 3 rings, a calm, slightly surprised voice answered. "Hello. Ms. Brenner, this is Lenny Walker, Clara Jensen's bus driver. We met at orientation." "Oh, yes, of course," she replied quickly. "Mr. Walker, is everything all right?" Her tone shifted immediately. Lenny cleared his throat. "I'm sorry to call you out of the blue, but I need to ask, have you noticed anything unusual about Clara? Anything that's worried you?" There was a pause. "Actually, yes," Ms. Brenner said slowly. "She's very quiet in class. Doesn't engage with the other students. I've caught her staring off during lessons. Today, she asked to go to the restroom 3 times. Eventually, the nurse said she wasn't in the bathroom, but in the theater room. She'd fallen asleep backstage. Has this been reported to the administration?" Lenny asked, gripping the wheel tighter. "I told Principal Banner." He brushed it off as new student adjustment issues. Lenny sighed, the irritation pressing heavier in his chest now. "I tried to contact him too. I sent photos, something I found under her seat on the bus." "What did you find?" Her voice sharpened. "A blister pack of birth control pills," Lenny said flatly. "Half used. Hidden under the vent where she always sits." The silence on the other end thickened. "That's not right," Margaret said finally. "She's only 15. Mr. Walker, I agree this needs to be taken seriously. I'm going to see if I can find her mother's emergency contact info in the school system. If she's in town, she needs to know." "She's not," Lenny said. "At least not today. I spoke with her stepfather. He said the mom's away, something about staying with a sick relative. I don't think Clara's safe with him." "I'll do what I can from my end," Margaret said. "Can you keep an eye on her until I figure out how to contact her family?" "Already doing that," Lenny replied. "I'm actually parked near the house, just to make sure nothing happens." "Be careful," she said, "and keep me posted." Lenny ended the call and looked out at the house once more. Still no movement. As the sun dipped lower and the first hints of evening chill crept into the air, he spotted a figure emerging from a side alley near the house. It was Clara, walking slowly, arms wrapped around her stomach, pale and visibly uncomfortable. She didn't notice his car as she trudged along the sidewalk, heading away from the house. Without hesitation, Lenny started the engine and pulled forward. He rolled down the window as he came alongside her. "Clara," he called gently. She froze, turning toward the voice. Her expression was drained, a mix of exhaustion and alarm. "Are you all right?" Lenny asked, keeping his tone low. "You look like you're in pain." "I'm fine," she muttered, taking a half step back. "Why are you following me?" "I'm not trying to scare you, kid," he said again. "But I've seen you hurting for days. I just want to help." Before she could answer, a couple walking their dog approached, eyeing the scene. "Everything okay here?" the man asked, looking at Clara. She hesitated. Then, in a barely audible voice, said, "He scares me." The words hit Lenny like a gut punch. The couple stepped between him and Clara instantly. "Sir, I think you should leave," the woman said. "She's clearly uncomfortable." "I'm her school bus driver," Lenny tried to explain, lifting his hands. "I'm just trying to help her." "She said she's scared," the man snapped. "Step back before we call the police." Reluctantly, Lenny returned to his car, the sting of misunderstanding sharp in his chest. As he drove away slowly, he looked in the mirror and saw Clara hunch over a garbage can and vomit violently. He pulled over half a block down, heart pounding. She was clearly ill, and no adult, was there to protect her.
Lenny remained parked across the street, engine off, the soft ticking of the cooling car filling the silence as he watched Clara from a distance. After vomiting into the trash bin, she leaned against the brick wall of the pharmacy beside it, wiping her mouth with the sleeve of her hoodie. Her thin arms were trembling. She looked barely able to stand. Lenny's instincts screamed at him to rush to her side, but after what had just happened with the couple and her whispered claim that he scared her, he knew any approach now could make things worse or get him arrested. So he stayed put, watching. After a few minutes, Clara straightened up and slowly made her way down the block. She moved with difficulty, clutching her stomach, stopping every few feet to lean against a lamppost or building. Lenny followed in his car at a respectful distance, never pulling close enough to be obvious, just enough to keep her in sight. As she rounded a corner toward a strip of small businesses, he saw her push open the door of a narrow storefront with a red and white sign above it. A bell jingled as she stepped inside. Lenny parked a little farther down the street, just around the corner, and waited. A few minutes later, she came out, but she wasn't alone. Russell Grant followed, locking the door behind him and flipping the open sign to closed. So this was where he worked. That explained why no one had been home earlier. Lenny watched as Russell and Clara walked toward a parked beige sedan in the lot beside the building. Russell had a paper bag in one hand and handed Clara a plastic bottle as they reached the car. From his vantage point, Lenny couldn't tell if it was water, soda, or something else, but Clara took it without enthusiasm, sat quietly in the passenger seat. Russell walked around to the driver's side, glancing up once to scan the street. Lenny ducked slightly, hoping the old car's dusty windshield would hide him. As the sedan pulled away from the liquor store, Lenny waited a few beats, then started his car and began following them. He kept several vehicles back, careful not to draw attention. He didn't know what he was doing exactly, only that Clara was in pain and her stepfather was taking her somewhere she clearly didn't want to go, and no one else seemed to care. As the sedan moved out of the town center and onto a quieter highway, Lenny dialed Margaret Brenner again. She answered on the second ring. "Miss Walker?" "And her stepfather," Lenny said without preamble. "They left his liquor store. I don't know where they're going yet, but she looks sick. Something is very wrong." "Oh my God," Margaret breathed. "Okay, I found the mother's emergency contact information. I've left 3 voicemails and an email, but no response so far." "I'm still trying." "Keep trying," Lenny said. "I'm going to stay with them just in case. You shouldn't be doing this alone." Lenny hung up as the sedan turned off the main road, onto a narrower, winding path lined with trees. The sign read, "Lakeside Recreation Area." It was a small county park on the outskirts of Brookvale, with picnic tables, a small lake, and a few hiking trails. There were other cars in the lot, families, joggers, a couple walking a dog, but the place was quiet for a Thursday afternoon. Lenny parked 2 rows behind Russell's car and watched as they got out. Russell carried a small cooler. Clara followed behind him slowly, dragging her feet. They walked toward the grassy area near the lake, where a few picnic blankets had already been laid out by other park visitors. Lenny waited a full 5 minutes before getting out of his car and following on foot. He stayed on the main path, pretending to be just another park-goer out for a stroll. From a distance, he watched Russell and Clara settle near a grove of trees, apart from the others. Russell laid out a blanket and began unloading items from the cooler. Clara sat stiffly at the edge, barely touching the can he handed her. Lenny's breath caught in his throat as he watched Russell open a beer for himself. He was drinking, here, in the open, in front of a teenage girl who looked visibly sick. Then came the moment that made Lenny stop in his tracks. Russell leaned over and placed both hands on Clara's shoulders, massaging them lightly, as if joking. Clara immediately stiffened and shoved him off, not playfully, but with force. Russell laughed, but Lenny could see the flash of anger in his eyes, just for a second. Lenny took out his phone and began filming. He zoomed in, capturing the body language, the discomfort, the way Clara sat frozen. At first glance it might look like nothing, a father figure goofing around. But Lenny knew better. He'd seen real laughter, real trust, on his bus every day. This wasn't it. For a moment he debated going over, confronting Russell, demanding he leave the girl alone. But then 3 more men approached the blanket. Lenny's stomach dropped. They were in their 30s, or 40s, dressed casually, but there was something about them too familiar with Russell, too focused on Clara. One of them shook Russell's hand, another patted him on the back. Together, the 5 of them began walking toward a maintenance building on the far side of the park, a plain white structure marked "Staff Only." One of the men pulled a key from his pocket and unlocked the door. The group disappeared inside. Panic seized Lenny's chest. There was no legitimate reason for 4 adult men and a sick, teenage girl to go into a locked maintenance shed. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911. "My name's Leonard Walker," he said urgently. "My name's Leonard Walker," he said urgently. "Lakeside Recreation Area. A girl, Clara Jensen, was just taken into a locked shed by 4 adult men, including her stepfather. I think she's in danger." "Are you certain she's in immediate danger?" "Yes," Lenny said. "I'm her school bus driver. She's been crying for days and I found birth control pills hidden under her seat. I've tried contacting the school. No one is helping. Please, just send someone now. Units are being dispatched," the dispatcher said. "Stay on the line. Can you see the building?" "Yes. I'm hiding behind a tree near the west path." "Do not approach the building. Just keep eyes on it." "Understood." Lenny crouched behind the tree, phone in hand, heart pounding. Through a dirty window in the shed, he could see shadows moving. Then, a voice, faint but unmistakable, drifted through the thin walls. "Clara, please don't make me," she was saying. "I can't do this. Your mom's about to have a new baby. When she finds out you're pregnant, she'll forget you even exist."
The tension in the air was suffocating as Lenny crouched behind the cluster of trees near the shed, still on the line with the 911 dispatcher. Units are en route, the voice assured him. Estimated arrival in under 10 minutes. Can you safely remain where you are? Lenny's knuckles whitened around the phone as he whispered, I'm staying. But something's happening in there. Through the dusty, high-set windows of the white maintenance shed, he could make out silhouettes for grown men standing over the small frame of Clara. Her back was against the wall, her arms folded across her chest, clearly distressed. The muffled sound from inside became chillingly distinct as the group went momentarily quiet, and then Greg's voice pierced through, cold, hissing with quiet fury. Do as you're told, Clara, he said. You know what happens if you don't cooperate. Clara's answer was trembling and broken. Please don't make me. I can't do this. Another voice, deeper and unfamiliar, followed. Your mother's about to forget you even exist once that baby comes. You're just an accident now. You better learn your place. Lenny relayed everything to the dispatcher in real time, his stomach churning. They're threatening her, mentally and emotionally. She's in immediate danger, he insisted. The police are 3 minutes out, the dispatcher replied. Please do not attempt to intervene. But Lenny couldn't just stand by. Every cell in his body was screaming to move. That's when he felt a presence behind him and turned, startled, to see 2 men in athletic wear joggers staring at him with furrowed brows. What are you doing? One of them asked suspiciously. Peeking in a shed? Lenny explained quickly, voice low and urgent. There's a girl inside. For men. I called 911. They're hurting her. The taller jogger peered in through the window and went pale. We can't just wait here, he said firmly. They could be doing anything to her. The police said to wait, Lenny countered, torn between obedience and instinct. But before they could argue further, a sudden silence fell from inside the shed, as if the men had sensed something. Then, barely audible, Clara cried out, Help! Please help me! That was it. The joggers rushed forward, pounding on the shed door. Hey, open up in there, one yelled. Inside, a sudden rustling erupted, movement, voices raised in alarm. Then, almost as if coordinated, the approaching whir of sirens echoed across the park. Red and blue lights flickered through the trees. 2 patrol cars screeched into the lot, officers pouring out, guns drawn. Police. Everyone inside, come out with your hands visible, one officer shouted. No response came. One officer ran back to the cruiser and returned with a crowbar. With a powerful swing, he broke the lock and the door burst inward. Hands up. Now. Officers swarmed in, shouting commands. 3 of the men complied immediately, kneeling with hands behind their heads. But Greg stood firm near Clara, who was still crouched against the wall. Step away from the girl, the officer barked, gun trained on him. Now. Greg's jaw clenched. This is a misunderstanding, he began, but the officer didn't flinch. Last warning. Greg reached toward a nearby shelf and grabbed a glass bottle, holding it in the air. You don't understand. Drop it, the officers yelled in unison. Greg hesitated, then dropped the bottle and slowly raised his hands. On your knees. He obeyed finally. Officers moved in, cuffing each man and escorting them outside. Greg's gaze locked onto Lenny and twisted into rage. You, he shouted. This is your fault. With a sudden burst of energy, he lunged toward Lenny, nearly breaking free from the officer's grip. I'll kill you, he screamed before being slammed against the patrol car and restrained. Inside the shed, Clara remained trembling, curled into herself. A female officer knelt beside her, speaking gently. Within minutes, the park became a flurry of emergency lights and crime scene tape. 2 more police cars and an ambulance arrived. Paramedics offered Clara a blanket and checked her vitals. A social worker, a calm woman named Ms. Rivera, knelt beside her and whispered reassurances. The 2 joggers, who'd helped were giving statements to the police, and one gave Lenny a silent thumbs up before walking away. As Lenny finished his own account, he glanced toward the ambulance. Clara looked up and their eyes met. Her expression was fragile, but filled with something new. Hope. She said something to Ms. Rivera, who then gestured for Lenny to approach. He did, cautiously, not wanting to overwhelm her. "Thank you," Clara whispered, her voice hoarse. "I'm just glad you're safe," he replied, crouching beside her. From his waist bag, he pulled out the plastic bag containing the pink pills. "I found these under your seat on the bus," he said gently. "If these were because of something Greg was doing, now's the time to tell the truth." Clara's face collapsed in fresh sobs. "He started coming into my room," she whispered, "a month ago, when Mom left to stay with Grandma before the baby came. He said if I told anyone, he'd kill us all." The officer and social worker listened carefully, compassion in their eyes. Clara continued, "I started feeling sick. A girl at school told me about the pills. I thought they'd stop me from getting pregnant. I bought them with my savings. But I was already too late." The paramedic sighed softly. "Those pills prevent pregnancy, but only if taken before. If you're already pregnant," Clara stared at the ground, lost in fear. "I didn't know." Lenny placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You did the best you could, Clara. But now you're not alone." The social worker nodded. "We're going to take you to the hospital, sweetheart. A doctor will examine you, and we'll call your mother." Clara's lips trembled. "She's going to hate me." "She's going to love you," the officer said, "because none of this is your fault." As they loaded Clara into the ambulance, the social worker turned to Lenny. "Would you come with us? You're a familiar face. She trusts you." Lenny nodded without hesitation. "I'll stay by her side." As the ambulance doors closed and the vehicle pulled away, Lenny sat beside Clara, holding her hand gently. The ride was quiet, solemn, and yet something unspoken passed between them, an understanding. Because in a world that often looked the other way, one man had chosen to see.
The emergency room at Brookvale Memorial Hospital buzzed with its usual evening chaos. Nurses moving quickly with clipboards and IV carts, the low hum of machines, the occasional overhead page breaking through the white noise. Lenny sat hunched in a rigid plastic chair in the waiting area outside the pediatric wing, a paper cup of lukewarm coffee clutched in his hands. His jacket, now draped over his lap, smelled faintly of bus diesel and fall leaves. It had been over 2 hours since they'd arrived with Clara, and she had been taken almost immediately by the medical team for examination and initial trauma evaluation. The social worker, Ms. Rivera, had updated him twice, once to confirm they had contacted Clara's mother, and again to assure him that Clara was in a stable but emotionally fragile state. "She asked if you were still here," Ms. Rivera had said, offering a gentle smile that tugged at Lenny's heart. "He's holding up, but she's scared, confused, and she's trying hard not to be." That had been 20 minutes ago. Now, the sliding doors to the ER wing whooshed open, and Ms. Rivera reappeared, walking toward Lenny with calm urgency. "Mr. Walker," she said, "Clara's in a private room now. She's been asking for you. If you're still willing, you can come in." Lenny was on his feet before she finished. "Of course," he said, setting down his coffee and slipping on his jacket. He followed her through a maze of corridors until they reached room 17B, a small room with a single hospital bed, a rolling monitor, and a cushioned chair next to the window. Clara sat upright on the bed, wrapped in a hospital-issued blanket, a pediatric nurse, adjusting her blood pressure cuff. Her eyes lit up slightly when she saw Lenny. "Hey, kiddo," he said softly as he entered, offering a small wave. The nurse gave him a brief nod before stepping out to give them privacy. "How are you doing?" Clara shrugged, her face pale but dry now. "Tired," she murmured, "but I'm glad you're here." Lenny moved to the chair and sat beside her. "Dr. Chen will be back in shortly," Ms. Rivera said from the doorway. "She's reviewing your test results, Clara. You're doing very brave work today." Clara nodded. After a moment, the door opened again, and a woman in a white coat stepped in, her dark hair pulled into a low ponytail, a tablet cradled in her arm. "Good evening. I'm Dr. Chen," she said gently. "Clara, I've reviewed your blood work and ultrasound. Would you like Mr. Walker to stay while I talk with you?" Clara looked over at Lenny and gave a slight nod. "Yes, please." Dr. Chen pulled her to the stool and sat at the end of the bed, her expression calm but serious. "Clara, you're in the early stages of pregnancy, about 5 weeks along." Clara exhaled sharply, a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Her hands immediately clutched the blanket tighter around her. "It's okay to be scared," Dr. Chen said gently. "But you're not alone anymore, and there are options, okay? You're safe now, and you'll be cared for." Lenny remained quiet, not wanting to interrupt, but he could feel Clara's sobs booming. "We're going to help you through this," the doctor continued. "But I also need to speak with your mother, once she arrives." As if on cue, there was a commotion in the hallway. Raised voices. Then the door burst open. A woman in her late 30s rushed in, breathless, her face flushed with panic. Behind her was an older woman, perhaps 60, her expression hard, protective. "Clara," the younger woman cried, rushing to the bed and wrapping her arms around her daughter. "Oh, baby, are you okay? I'm here now. I'm so sorry." Clara melted into the hug, clutching her mother as if she might disappear again. "Mom," she whispered, rocking her gently. "None of this is your fault. I didn't know. I never should have left you with him." The older woman moved to the other side of the bed and rested a hand on Clara's back. "We're going to get through this together," she said firmly. "I promise you." Dr. Chen gave them a moment before gently interrupting. "Mrs. Jensen, I'm Dr. Chen. I've been looking after Clara. I need to speak with you privately about her condition and next steps. Would that be all right?" Clara's mother hesitated, then nodded. She kissed Clara's forehead and whispered, "I'll be right back," before following the doctor out. The older woman remained behind, clearly refusing to leave her granddaughter alone. Clara looked over at Lenny again. "You really stayed the whole time?" she asked, voice still faint. "Yeah," he said. "Didn't want you to feel like no one had your back." Clara gave him a small, tired smile. "I'm glad it was you who found those pills. I wish I'd seen more. Sooner." "You did enough," she said. "You did more than anyone else." The older woman, Mrs. Jensen's mother, clearly Clara's grandmother, took her sister. "Thank you for helping my granddaughter. I don't think we'll ever be able to repay you. I'm just glad she's safe now," Lenny replied, shaking her hand firmly. Just then Dr. Chen returned with Clara's mother, whose face was drawn and pale. "Clara," she said, "I need to talk with you. About your pregnancy. About what you want to do." Clara's expression crumpled again. "I don't want it," she said in a choked whisper. "I want it gone. I don't want to remember him." Her mother nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Okay," she said. "We'll figure it out. Illinois allows it. And you don't have to go through this alone." Clara looked up at Lenny. "Will you stay?" "As long as you need," he said. That night, as the stars rose over Brookvale, a new chapter began, not just for Clara but for everyone who had failed to see, who had been too busy, too distracted, too late. Everyone, except for Lenny Walker, who had looked in his rearview mirror and refused to look away.
It was just past 1 a.m. when Lenny finally exited the hospital room, the fluorescent lights of Brookvale Memorial casting long shadows across the polished tile floors. He was exhausted, physically and emotionally drained, but somehow his legs kept moving forward down the silent corridor. He had promised Clara he would stay, and he had. Through the hospital intake, the exam, the quiet crying when she learned she was pregnant, through the moment her mother arrived, frantic and horrified, and through the decision, clear, firm, that she didn't want to carry her stepfather's child. Clara had spoken those words without hesitation. In the waiting lounge outside the maternity ward, a woman sat quietly, her hands cradling a heavily pregnant belly. She looked up as Lenny approached, her eyes red from crying. This was Laura Jensen, Clara's mother, who had returned to town just hours earlier after receiving the call that shattered her world. She stood slowly, one hand supporting her back, and offered her other hand to Lenny. "Mr. Walker," she said softly, "I didn't get a chance earlier to thank you properly. You saved my daughter's life." Lenny shook her hand gently. "Please just call me Lenny." Laura gestured to the empty chair beside her, and he sat down with a tired sigh. She did the same, sinking into the seat with great effort. "Clara told me everything," she said quietly. "What she went through. What he did. I don't know how I missed it." Lenny didn't respond right away. He knew no words could dull the ache of that kind of guilt. He was careful. Lenny finally said, "That kind of evil usually is. Don't blame yourself, Laura. Blame him." She gave a short, bitter laugh. "I left her with him because I thought he loved us. I went to my mother's to give birth to our new baby. I thought I was doing the right thing." Lenny looked at her closely. She seemed strong but fragile, like porcelain under pressure. "You couldn't have known," he said again, more gently this time. "Monsters like Greg, they hide in plain sight. They charm their way into families. They wait, and then they break the people they say they care about." Laura pressed her hand to her stomach, tears welling in her eyes. "And now, I have a child inside me who shares his blood. How do I bring that baby into the world, knowing what he did to Clara?" Her voice trembled on the edge of panic. "How do I love this child?" Lenny didn't answer immediately. Instead, he sat back, thinking of his own children, 5 of them, each different, each a product of their own complex beginnings. "Love doesn't get smaller just because something terrible happens," he said finally. "It doesn't divide. It multiplies. The way I see it, you're not bringing Greg's child into the world. You're bringing yours. And Clara's brother or sister. This baby is a chance to do something different, not a punishment." Laura stared at him, her jaw trembling. "You really believe that?" "I know it," Lenny replied, "because I've lived it." Their conversation was cut short by sudden movement down the hallway. Eleanor Parker, Laura's mother and Clara's grandmother, was walking quickly toward them, her face pale. "Laura," she called, "something's happening." Laura stood up, alarmed. "What do you mean?" "I think it's time," Eleanor said, her hand guiding Laura back toward the maternity wing. "Your water just broke." Nurses arrived seconds later with a wheelchair. As they rushed Laura away, she reached back and grabbed Lenny's wrist. "Please," she gasped through a contraction. "Stay with Clara. Don't let her be alone." "I promise," Lenny said, watching them disappear into the delivery ward. Eleanor gave him a grateful nod before following. The hallway fell silent once again, the tension and urgency replaced by a heavier calm. Lenny turned and slowly walked back toward Clara's room. Inside, the girl sat on the edge of the bed, her expression blank, her hands knotted together in her lap. She looked up as he entered. "Is my mom okay?" she asked immediately. "She's in labor," Lenny replied. "They're taking good care of her." Clara nodded, then looked down at her hands again. "She got so upset earlier. We were talking about what to do. She said she didn't want me to carry this baby," Clara said quietly. "But my grandma," she hesitated. "She said maybe I should. That we could pretend it was some boy from school. That no one ever had to know what really happened." Lenny sat beside her, careful to give space. "What do you want, Clara?" he asked gently. "Forget what your grandma or your mom or anyone else says. What do you want?" Clara didn't answer for a long moment. Then, with a trembling voice, she said, "I don't want it. I want to feel like myself again. I don't want to look at my body and remember what he did." Lenny exhaled slowly, feeling the depth of her pain. "Then that's what we'll do," he said. "You've got a say now. You've got people listening. Doctors, lawyers, your mom. Me." Clara's eyes shimmered. "You really think my mom will still love me after all this?" "Rory, Lenny said softly, using her name with care. I have 5 kids. Every time one was born, people said I wouldn't have enough love to go around. But love isn't like that. It's not a pie that gets smaller with every slice. It's like candles. You light one, then another, and the first one never burns less brightly. Clara stared at him, her lip trembling. You think she'll still see me as her daughter? She'll see you as her daughter, and as someone stronger than anyone should have to be, Lenny said. You didn't do anything wrong. You survived something awful, and now you're choosing to live. That's power, Clara. That's courage. For a moment, the sterile hospital room felt almost warm, safe. Clara wiped her face and gave a weak smile. Thank you, Mr. Walker. Lenny, he corrected. You can call me Lenny. She nodded, resting her head back against the pillow. Okay, Lenny. He stayed there in the dim light, beside the girl he'd once only known as the quiet one in seat 4B. And as they waited for news of her mother and the new baby soon to be born, Lenny realized something else. That sometimes it isn't about being a hero. It's about being a witness, about paying attention, about refusing to look away when the world wants you to. Because in a moment when everyone else had dismissed her tears, when her pain had been hidden behind the routine of a school bus route, he had seen her. And because of that, she was alive.
The hospital room remained quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors and the occasional distant murmur of night shift staff moving through the halls. Clara had fallen asleep at last, curled on her side, her hand still resting lightly on the edge of Lenny's sleeve. He didn't move. He stayed in the chair beside her, watching the slow rise and fall of her breath, letting the silence hold. Outside the window, the stars of Brookvale shimmered over breath, It was 4 a.m. when a nurse finally came into the room and touched Lenny's shoulder gently. He's doing well, the nurse whispered, nodding toward Clara. And your other girl, her mother, is in recovery. Gave birth to a healthy baby boy about an hour ago. 7 pounds 10 ounces. Lenny exhaled slowly, releasing the breath he hadn't realized he was holding. She asked about Clara, he murmured. She did, the nurse confirmed. They'll bring her by when she's strong enough to be moved. But right now she's asking for you. Lenny looked back at Clara, her face still soft in sleep. He hesitated, then stood carefully, trying not to disturb her. I'll come right back, he whispered. Promise. He followed the nurse down the corridor toward the maternity wing, the hallways dim and echoing in the early morning hush. When they reached Laura's room, the door was cracked open. Inside, the glow of a small lamp bathed the space in a gentle gold light. Laura was propped against pillows, her damp with sweat, her arms cradling the swaddled newborn, resting on her chest. She looked up as Lenny entered, her face a mix of fatigue and overwhelming emotion. Lenny, she said softly. He's here. He's okay. And Clara? She's sleeping, Lenny replied, peacefully. Laura looked down at the baby, her hands gently adjusting the blanket. He looks like her, she whispered. Even this little. I can see it. His mouth, his cheeks. He looks like Clara when she was born. Lenny remained silent, letting her speak. I didn't want to believe it, not at first. That Greg could do something so monstrous. But when I saw the way Clara looked at me, how afraid she was to even tell me what happened, I knew. She shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. I left my daughter with a predator. I didn't protect her. You didn't know, Lenny said again. You believed you were building a family. I was wrong, she said bitterly. And now I've got a baby who carries that man's DNA. A baby I didn't ask for. And yet, she looked down again, brushing her finger gently across the infant's cheek. And yet he's innocent. He didn't choose who his father was. Lenny stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. Babies don't carry sin, he said. They carry potential. This boy has a clean start. What he becomes, that's up to you. And Clara, and the family that loves him. Laura nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. Clara said she doesn't want to keep the pregnancy, she's sure. She's already endured more than any girl her age should have to, Lenny said. She deserves to have you standing by her now. Laura looked at him, eyes shimmering. And she's lucky she had you watching over her when no one else did. If you hadn't noticed, if you hadn't followed her that day, she trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Lenny looked down at the newborn. You want me to tell her about her brother? Laura nodded. Not yet, when she's ready. Right now, just be there when she wakes up, please. I will, Lenny promised. He lingered another moment, then stepped back into the hallway, his steps slow and quiet as he made his way back to Clara's room. When he returned, she was still asleep, her arm now curled under her head, the blanket tangled around her knees. He settled into the chair once again, letting the fatigue settle into his bones, his body heavy with the weight of all they had seen, all they had survived. The next morning, the sun rose slow and pale over the edge of Brookvale. In the room, Clara stirred, her lashes fluttering before she opened her eyes. Her gaze settled on Lenny immediately, and a small smile touched her lips. You stayed, she said. I told you I would, Lenny replied. Did my mom come back? Not yet, he said. She's resting, and she has someone else with her now. Clara blinked. The baby. Yeah, Lenny said. He's healthy. You have a little brother now. Clara didn't say anything for a moment. Then she nodded, very slowly. Does he know? She asked quietly. Know what happened? Not yet, Lenny said. He's just a baby, but someday you'll decide what he needs to know. That's your choice too. Clara looked away, toward the window where the sunlight filtered through the slats. I don't want him to grow up thinking I hated him. But I can't be near him either, not now. That's okay, Lenny said. One expects you to have it all figured out. You get to take your time. You get to feel whatever you feel. There was a soft knock at the door, and Ms. Rivera stepped in with a warm smile and a clipboard. Clara, good morning. We'll need to do a few more things before discharge, but I also wanted to tell you. Your procedure can be scheduled for tomorrow morning, if you're still certain. Clara didn't hesitate. I am. Ms. Rivera nodded. I'll take care of the paperwork, and your mom will be back soon. As she left, Clara looked back at Lenny. Will you come with me tomorrow? If you want me to, he said. Every step. She nodded. Then, after a pause, she asked, Do you think he'll go to prison, Greg? Lenny's face hardened. Yes, he's already in custody. The other men are cooperating. The case is strong. Clara's jaw tightened. Good. I want him to know he didn't break me. He won't, Lenny said. You've already proven that. Outside, a new day had begun, and for the first time in weeks, Clara Jensen felt the future stretching ahead of her. Not just heavy and uncertain, but full of choice, of voice, of strength. And beside her sat the man who had seen her tears and refused to look away. The following day began with a thin mist clinging to the streets of Brookvale, turning the hospital parking lot into a landscape of soft gray. Inside the building, however, everything moved with quiet, purposeful urgency. In room 17B, Clara sat on the edge of her hospital bed, dressed in a light gown, her hands resting calmly in her lap. Despite everything, she looked composed, her back straight, her jaw set, her eyes focused on the doorway as if preparing for something greater than surgery. She didn't cry, she didn't shake. If fear stirred within her, she had buried it beneath resolve. Lenny arrived just after sunrise, the sleeves of his flannel rolled up, his face lined with fatigue and care. He had barely slept, but there was no hesitation in his step as he entered her room. Morning, he said gently. Hey, Clara replied, managing a small smile. Ready? He asked. Yeah, she said. I think I am. There were no words for what lay ahead, not really. No phrases or sayings that could ease the weight of the decision she'd made. But Clara didn't need comfort, she needed presence, and Lenny understood that. He took the chair beside her and waited. Wendy, Rivera came in a few minutes later, a clipboard in hand and 2 nurses in tow. Clara, everything's been approved, she said warmly. Your mother has signed the consent, and the doctor is prepping the surgical suite. We'll escort you there, now. Clara nodded. As the nurses helped her into a wheelchair, she turned slightly to look at Lenny. You'll be there after. The whole time, he promised. She gave him one last grateful glance before they wheeled her away, the hallway swallowing the soft squeak of the wheels. Lenny sat back, heart pounding in his chest. It was strange, the helplessness he felt, watching her disappear around the corner. He had been so active the last few days, searching, following, intervening, reporting. Now, all he could do was wait. He returned to the waiting room near the pediatric wing and sat silently for a long while, watching the sun rise across the eastern windows. The light bled into the room slowly, watching everything in a sterile glow. After nearly 2 hours, a nurse came in and called his name. "Mr. Walker? Clara's out of surgery. She's awake now. She asked for you." He rose immediately and followed the nurse back to her room. Clara lay in bed, her face pale, a thin sheen of sweat on her forehead, but her eyes were open. She looked at him as he entered, and the faintest smile curved at her lips. "It's done," she said softly. Lenny approached and took the chair beside her again. "How do you feel?" "Tired, but relieved." "You were brave," he said. "Felt terrified. But I knew what I wanted. That was enough." "It is enough," Lenny said, his voice steady. Later that afternoon, Laura entered the room, holding the newborn in her arms. She was still weak but steadier now, her steps more confident. Clara looked up, eyes darting between her mother and the bundle in her arms. "He's beautiful," Clara said, surprising both herself and Laura. "Thank you," Laura whispered, sitting down slowly in the chair across from the bed. "I wanted you to meet him, only if you're ready." Clara stared at the baby for a long moment. "Can I hold him?" "Of course," Laura said, standing and moving carefully toward the bed. Laura gently placed the baby in Clara's arms. The infant squirmed, let out a tiny sigh, and settled. Clara held him awkwardly at first, then more securely, her arms adjusting. She stared into his face, his eyelids fluttering in sleep. His tiny fingers curled into fists. "He doesn't know anything. That happened." "No," Laura said, "and he never will unless you decide to tell him." Clara nodded. "He's not to blame." "Neither are you," Laura said. "You're not broken. You're not ruined. You're my daughter, and I love you." Clara's eyes shimmered. The baby made a soft noise, a mewling almost cry, and Clara instinctively rocked him slightly. "He looks like you," Laura said. Clara nodded. "Maybe that'll be enough." "For what?" "To remind me that I'm more than what happened," she said. "That I get to keep the parts of me that Greg tried to take." Laura reached out and placed a hand over Clara's. "You do. Every single one." They sat like that for a while, quiet, united by pain and healing. Lenny watched from his chair, heart swelling with something he didn't quite have words for. Later, as the sky darkened, a police officer arrived to update them. "Greg Whitmore has been officially charged," he informed them. "Multiple counts." "He won't make bail?" "And the 3 men arrested with him? They're cooperating. We believe this wasn't the first time he's done this. But it will be the last." Clara listened without speaking, her jaw set. "Eventually, yes," the officer said. "It's not right away. We'll support you through the entire process." Clara nodded. I want to make sure he never does this to anyone else." "You will," the officer said. "You already have." After he left, the room fell quiet again. Lenny looked at Clara. "You saved yourself," he said. "But you also saved someone else. That baby? He'll grow up safe because of you. Your story won't define you, but your strength? That's what people will remember." Clara nodded slowly, then leaned her head back against the pillow. "I just want to sleep now." "You've earned it," Lenny said. As the nurse dimmed the lights and Laura settled in beside her daughter, Lenny stepped into the hallway. Outside, the stars were coming out again, just like the night before. But everything had changed. Justice had begun. Healing had begun. And Clara Jensen, once the girl who cried quietly on the school bus, unnoticed by almost everyone, was now the center of something far bigger. She was not just a survivor. She was the start of a story that would ripple outward. A mother, reborn. A child born safe. 2 weeks later, the air in Brookvale had turned colder, with the crispness of late autumn settling into the wind that swept through the quiet neighborhoods and rustled the red and gold leaves lining the sidewalks. The trees had begun to shed fully, leaving bare branches against gray skies, and the buses that traveled through the town now picked up bundled children in coats and scarves. On Route 14, Lenny Walker sat in his driver's seat, his gloved hands wrapped around the steering wheel as the morning sun broke through the fog. The same route, the same turns, but something was different now. Clara no longer rode the bus. She had been given time off school to rest, to heal. She and her mother had moved temporarily to Eleanor Parker's home on the other side of town, away from the house where everything had gone wrong. The school had assigned a counselor to her case. Principal Banner had been placed under internal review after it was revealed he had ignored multiple staff concerns. Miss Margaret Brenner was now leading an initiative to train all faculty to recognize early signs of abuse. The small ripples of Clara's story were already beginning to shift tides. Lenny found himself thinking about her constantly, not out of worry anymore, but out of a quiet, persistent admiration. She had faced something most couldn't imagine, and hadn't just survived, but fought back. Her testimony had helped build a case that would put Greg Whitmore away for decades. The charges included not only sexual abuse of a minor but conspiracy, corruption of minors, and involvement with an unlicensed trafficking ring uncovered thanks to the 3 men who had flipped under interrogation. The horror was greater than anyone had realized, but so was the bravery that had brought it to light. On a quiet Thursday afternoon, Lenny's phone buzzed during his break. It was a message from Laura. "Clara's doing better. She's asked about you. Would you like to come by this weekend?" Lenny replied immediately, saying he'd be honored. That Saturday, he drove to the Parker residence, a small 2-story house at the edge of a wooded cul-de-sac. The yard was tidy, the porch decorated with orange pumpkins and a wooden sign that read, "Hope lives here." As he knocked on the door, it was Clara herself who answered. She looked healthier, color in her cheeks, light in her eyes, her hair brushed and neatly tied back. "Hey," she said, opening the door wider. "Come in." Lenny stepped inside, smiling. "Hey, kiddo." The living room smelled of cinnamon and something baking. A baby's coo drifted from the direction of the kitchen. Laura entered the room carrying her son swaddled in a blue blanket. "She sleeps a little more each night. That's something, right?" "That's everything," Lenny replied, and they all sat together on the couch, the baby nestled safely in his mother's arms. Clara sat across from them, holding a mug of tea, watching. "I've been journaling," she said after a while. "I thought about writing everything that happened, not for school, just for me, to remember it all, and to remember how it ended. I don't want to forget." Lenny nodded. "That's smart, writing things down. It helps you own your story before it owns you." Clara looked thoughtful. "Do you think people will believe me? Later, I mean. When I tell them about what he did, how it all happened?" "They will," Lenny said gently. "And even if they don't, you'll still know the truth. That matters more than anything." "I'm going back to school next month," Clara said. "Part-time at first, but I want to finish." "You will," Lenny said. "And anything you want after that you'll do too." Laura looked up. "She wants to become a counselor someday, to work with girls like her, maybe even in schools." Clara shrugged, smiling a little. "I figure if someone like you can do what you did with just a school bus and a gut feeling, then maybe I can do something too." Lenny's eyes stung slightly at that, but he simply smiled. "You already are." The baby stirred, letting out a soft cry. Laura stood and walked with him gently into the other room, leaving Clara and Lenny alone for a moment. "I never really thanked you," Clara said, voice soft. "I mean, I did, but not really. Not for everything." "You don't have to," Lenny said. "I saw something wasn't right, and I didn't walk away. That's all." "It's more than that," she insisted. "You saw me, not just what I was going through, but me. Nobody else really looked, not even me some days." Lenny reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "I was going to mail this, but I figured I'd give it to you in person." She opened it carefully, revealing a folded letter and a photograph. The photo showed the inside of the bus, taken from the rear, Clara's empty seat in the foreground. "You don't ride the bus anymore," he said, "but that seat is still yours, and it always will be." The letter inside was handwritten, short. It read, "Clara, when I saw your tears, I knew something was wrong. I'm sorry it took days for me to act, but I'm not sorry for following my instinct. You reminded me that. No one is ever too small to be noticed. You reminded me why I do what I do. Thank you. Clara looked up, eyes glassy, and gave him a quick hug. It was brief but strong. I'm going to be okay, she said. I know, Lenny replied. As he left the house that afternoon, the sky overhead was a clean, cloudless blue. The trees shimmered in gold, and for the first time in a long while, everything felt right. Justice had been done, a girl had been saved. A family had begun to heal, and the man who had once thought he was just a retired mechanic turned bus driver had become something else entirely. A witness, a protector, a reminder. That one pair of eyes paying attention could change everything. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more real-life mysteries and powerful rescues like this one. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. And if you're the praying kind, drop a God bless Clara below. Your words might just be the light someone else needs today.